All right, guys, as promised, 2020 Intel Core i5 MacBook Pro review, and if it's worth it this year. Kind of personally, I think it is.
Yo, you sure about that?
Well, yeah.
You didn't feel that way like 5 minutes ago. Tell them.
He's got a point. Let's get into it.
It was always, it was always, sometimes I think about it so hard.
So in reality, this is going to be a fun one. There's no better way to test a laptop than literally going on the road and kind of testing it out for exactly what it's meant for, and that is portable workload. I actually have a trip tomorrow headed to Stillwater, Oklahoma for the NCAA cross-country championships. The University of Utah had one athlete qualify. I actually made a motion graphic for that athlete on my Instagram, mt_graphics5. Give it a follow. And it was actually one of the most fun projects I've had to work on so far. It doesn't usually have my standard graphic look, which is a little bit more kind of like a grainy, textury look, but it was one of my favorites nonetheless. Funny story though, in the process of creating that graphic, I ran into a few problems with this MacBook Pro, and while all in all, I do find it a little bit more of a positive experience than a negative one, there definitely were some negatives, and even some more negatives after that we'll totally get into, but for right now, let's take it on the road. All right, back in Salt Lake after an awesome weekend in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And about this MacBook Pro, I've kind of got a lot to report to you guys. But first, I feel like this could use a bit of an upgrade. I mean, what do you think? Just give me 1 second. Oh, that's a little bit better. And a sweater. Anyway, back to work. The 2020 Intel Core i5 MacBook Pro that I have here came out in May of 2020. So you can technically call it the mid-2020 MacBook Pro. It came out as a small, refreshed design of the laptop that absolutely the entire world loves, and, well, almost absolutely the entire world. PC equals master race, people. I know you're out there, and I agree with you, to an extent. Right now, let's talk to the people who are trying to ball out on a budget for a really sleek looking brand new MacBook Pro, especially now that this one is discounted. Now, while Apple has just recently announced their switch to their in-house designed M1 chips, which are proven to be significantly more powerful, this 2020 Intel version still impressed me on a lot of different occasions, and let's get into exactly what those were. First, the pros, and yes, that's a pun. Pro number one, the build quality. Now, I wish I could just look into this lens and be like, it's Apple. But a lot of people might be genuinely curious, so let's get into it. Apple's build quality and design language is something that almost all companies all over the world have tried to mimic in order to increase sales. There are several companies overseas, Huawei, that have literally taken the design of the MacBook Pro, slapped their logo on it, and increased their sales because of it. The computer is made of an enclosed aluminum body with zero flex whatsoever. On the keyboard, in the screen, anywhere, there's no flex at all, which really gives that very high quality premium feel to the device. Now, this design in the 2020 MacBook Pro is identical to the 2021 model. So if design is something that you're worried about, fear not, it's identical. A couple other pluses of the build quality and design. Since it's still running that Intel Core processor, it has the 4 Thunderbolt ports. Thunderbolt is directly a technology related to Intel. With the 4 ports, you then get additional display support as well, while the M1 really only supports one other one. The Intel models, however, will support more than one additional display alongside the laptop's display. That is, until they update the new M1 chips, it will inevitably support more than one. But for now, great pro. Pro number 2, the Apple ecosystem. Now, to avoid this video being 27 minutes long, I'm going to keep this real short and succinct. It is the seamless integration between all of your Apple devices. If you're already in the Apple ecosystem, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Handoff, AirDrop, copy and paste, Find My. I mean, the list goes on. That subject, however, I will create a completely different video all dedicated to that one subject. Let's go into pro number 3, which is the performance. If you were coming from any pre-2020 MacBook Pro, you're going to be unbelievably thrilled with the performance that you get from this particular machine. The 4-port model actually has much better ventilation for more efficient airflow. There are 2 openings on the side of the machine, as well as 2 in the back for both fans inside the unit. This actually allows the CPU to cool much faster and much more efficiently. Therefore, it kind of keeps that speed up for a much longer period of time. When it came to Photoshop, After Effects, Lightroom, even Premiere Pro, I'm relatively happy with the performance this thing brought. It has no issues exporting a bunch of Lightroom photos kind of all at once, and a lot of layer projects in Photoshop tend to run relatively smoothly. After looking at the Geekbench scores on this MacBook Pro, it actually ended up with a higher single core score than my desktop built tower. And that tower is running an 8-core Ryzen 3800X. Not exactly a slouch. Now, essentially what single core means is that it's going to be much faster, a little snappier, running very easy tasks like web browsing, video playback, email, messaging, very medial, run-of-the-mill type tasks. Now, before you PC boys start calling me an Apple fanboy, which I guess I kind of am, this MacBook is actually not what is editing these YouTube videos. I'd be screwed otherwise. I'm mainly using my built tower PC. The thing literally cuts through 4K footage with a LUT like a hot knife through butter. Okay, so I know what you might be thinking. Didn't you just rave about this MacBook's performance in Premiere Pro, and yet you edit on your tower-built PC? Yes, that segues perfectly into the cons of this laptop. Con number 1, the performance. Now, I'm sure we're all confused, like, I thought that was a pro. Well, now it's a con. Actually, it's both. Let's get into it. While on the road in Stillwater, I rendered this motion graphic that you're about to see. During that 37-layer project, which I know is absolutely no small task, the MacBook completely froze up, turning into the rainbow wheel of death. Everything was unclickable, I couldn't move anything, the screen was essentially useless. And not only that, but it was incredibly hot to the touch, to the point where if I had put that on my bare legs, I'd practically be an ironing board. If we also look at that motion graphic that I created, the Utah athlete, there are some moments when moving the actual document that the quality is completely destroyed. It goes from being shot on an iPhone 12 Pro Max to literally being shot on a potato in certain keyframes. That is a flawless example of those 4 cores being unable to keep up with the workload. Speaking of that, let's go into my absolute favorite analogy for describing computer processors, albeit a little bit childish. Let's look at the processor as if it was a kitchen. If you have 4 high-speed chefs in a kitchen and you have a very slow night at the restaurant, everyone's meals are going to be right on time and unbelievably delicious, since 4 meals are able to be prepared at once, which calls for a very successful night in the restaurant. However, let's say the restaurant is incredibly busy and you still only have those 4 chefs. Not only are there not enough hands in the kitchen, but meals are also going to suffer in quality in order to try to feed everybody in the house. If you had 8 relatively fast chefs in that kitchen, however, on the same busy night, the meals will be done faster, quality of the meals really doesn't take a hit, and everyone in the restaurant is left super satisfied. Okay, that was a ridiculously low-level and childish analogy, but you kind of get the point, right? Need I say any more as to why I pick my Tower PC over this MacBook Pro for video editing? Absolutely not. Performance on a desktop still significantly better than this portable device. However, for a portable device, really only freezing a couple times, this thing kind of rocks. Those are just some things to take into consideration though. Note that you're gonna have a lot less power to work with because it's a physically smaller laptop chip as opposed to a more powerful desktop chip. But that really only depends if your workload is incredibly heavy like this one is. For those light tasks like emailing, web browsing, messaging, that a lot of people do when on the road, this did an incredible job. However, the ultimate performance when under heavier stress, not quite there. Take that into consideration. The final con, and probably the one you have to worry about the absolute least, is future-proofing. We all know that every year Apple releases a new software for every one of their devices. This one, however, being only 1 year old, you don't really have to worry about it all that much. However, the new models will definitely get software support for a little bit longer, just like every brand new iPhone. The iPhone lasts usually about 5 to 6 years on software updates, and then it's dead. But like I said, that's the least of your worries. If that's really that far up there on your list, then definitely go for the M1. And finally, we have the verdict. So, is this 1 year old 2020 MacBook Pro worth it this year in 2021? I think that kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you need something right now, right this second, since a lot of software has not quite been optimized for Apple's SoC, I think you absolutely can get this one. However, if you're looking for more power, more longevity, I definitely think you go for the M1 chip. It might not be optimized for everything just yet, but eventually all software will catch up to that chip, and it's going to be absolutely incredible. The Geekbench scores are already showing it. We're already seeing massive improvements in performance. I mean, almost desktop level quality. So, while this one is not the newest, the best, and the most powerful, it does an incredible job. And I think it's totally worth that $1,200 price on Amazon, if you need it right now. As one of my all-time favorite YouTubers, Renee Ritchie, says, when you're gonna go buy something, buy it, enjoy the hell out of it, because at the end of the day, there will always be something newer and better on the horizon. And as of right now, I'm gonna enjoy the crap out of this thing. Either way, guys, that's been it. Thanks so much for checking out this full review. It was a fun one, albeit a long one, but super stoked that you were able to make it all the way to the end of this one. Please feel free, like I said, to like, comment, subscribe. I'll be looking for all three of those, and until next time, see ya.